a decision that has the potential to pave the way for a more integrated, stable, and secure Middle East. It's the latest step in our consistent efforts over the course of multiple administrations to build bridges between countries in the region, and something we commit to advancing even further. The GCC plus three, the president was there for the GCC plus three summit, pledged billions of dollars worth of assistance to address food security. In response to President Putin's war against Ukraine, Saudi Arabia committed to support global oil market balancing for sustained economic growth. This followed on the heels of OPEC Plus's decision to increase production by 50% above what had been planned for July and August. We had an opportunity, the president, the secretary had an opportunity to discuss the ongoing truce in Yemen for the first time in more than 7 years. We have had months of a humanitarian pause in the fighting. It's during this period that we've been able to, the UN specifically, has been able to orchestrate the delivery of tons of humanitarian assistance to parts of Yemen that have been bereft of it for far too long. And we discussed with the GCC plus three, including our Saudi partners who were so instrumental to getting the ceasefire to be put in place initially, our profound desire to see it extended once again. And then running through all of these discussions, and this includes in our time in Israel, was a discussion of Iran and the challenge that Iran poses to the region and potentially beyond, and strategies and ways in which we can continue to coordinate our efforts to push back on Iran's malign activities and influence throughout the region. Yes. Let me move around a little bit. Yes.
During the president's visit to Saudi Arabia, did the administration secure any commitments regarding U.S. citizens and residents who are considered unfairly imprisoned or under travel ban in Saudi Arabia?
These types of issues are always on the agenda. The president has no higher priority than the safety and security of American citizens around the world, but I need to refer you to the White House for the specifics of that. Yes.
President Zelensky's allegations of treason and collaborating with Russia against many members of his own government, are they cause for concern, especially in regards to sharing U.S. intelligence and the prosecuting of war crimes?
Well, let me make a couple broad points. First, when it comes to the news we've heard out of Kyiv, we are aware of the reports and will continue to carefully monitor the situation. We are in daily contact with our Ukrainian partners. I think the fact is that over in all of our relationships, and including in this relationship, we invest not in personalities, we invest in institutions. And of course, President Zelensky has spoken to his rationale for making these personnel shifts. We'd, of course, refer you to him and to his office for more on that. The broader point, however, is that we all know, and it has been clear since well before February 24th, and really for the better part of a decade, that Moscow has long sought to subvert and to destabilize the Ukrainian government. Ever since Ukraine chose the path of democracy and a Western orientation, this has been something that Moscow has sought to subvert. Now, I'm not speaking to the personnel changes that were announced today. I'm speaking to the broader strategic intent on the part of Moscow. It looked a certain way in 2014 to February of 2022 with the start of the invasion. But what we're seeing and what we saw in the earliest days of Russia's war against Ukraine was very clearly an effort to not only subvert, but we think overthrow the Ukrainian government. Of course, an effort in which the Russian government has been unsuccessful. Yes.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
But you didn't say if you're concerned or not about sharing U.S. information with the prosecutor general's office. So Is that a concern? Have you put any of that sharing on hold? Because this wasn't about a personality, according to Zelensky, it was about a broader problem within that office.
Well, again, we've invested in the institution. Of course, there had been a relationship between the prosecutor general and individuals in this building and throughout the interagency. But I'm confident that that personal relationship can be built between people like Beth Van Schok and others with the incoming prosecutor general. We are leaning forward in terms of the information that we are sharing with our Ukrainian partners to help them build the case for accountability against those who may have perpetrated war crimes and other atrocities. The fact is that accountability and what is useful in terms of building these cases oftentimes is not especially sensitive. And you may recall that a couple months ago, we established the Conflict Observatory, whose role is to collect, to assimilate, and to make accessible open source information that points to potential atrocity crimes. And so much of the information, much of what we do pass to the Office of the Prosecutor General on a routine basis is open source information. We do have an intelligence sharing relationship with our Ukrainian counterparts. That is, we continue to proceed ahead with that. It's an important element of the assistance that we are providing to our Ukrainian partners in an effort to help them defend themselves. Yes.
So 2 quick questions on Mexico. 2 weeks ago, the New York Times published a report citing several officials within the administration very critical of the cozy relationship that Ambassador Ken Salazar has with President AMLO in Mexico. Has the secretary called Ambassador Salazar to reassure that there is full confidence on him? And second, last Friday, Mexico detained, arrested one of the top drug lords in the country, who is also part of the narcotics reward program from the State Department. What kind of collaboration did the U.S. provided, information sharing, or any other details to the Mexican government to conduct this operation?
So on your second question, there's not much I can provide beyond noting that counter-narcotics is an area of cooperation between our two governments. It's an area that was discussed when President Biden met with AMLO, President Lopez Obrador, in the Oval Office just under a week ago. But when it comes to specific investigations and the specific operations as such, it's not something I'd be able to speak to in any detail. When it comes to Ambassador Salazar, he often speaks to the senior-most individuals in this building. He's an outstanding ambassador who represents the interests of the American people in his role as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. We have a broad and deep relationship with Mexico, with agencies across the U.S. government that collaborate very closely with their Mexican partners to advance our many shared interests. Just spoke to one of them, but there are many more. Since the beginning of this administration, we've relaunched the U.S.-Mexico high-level economic dialogue, the bilateral high-level security dialogue, and the North American Leaders Summit. And Ambassador Salazar has been a leading voice and a leading force in all of these efforts. Now, of course, there is a lot to do bilaterally with our Mexican counterparts. There was a lot on the table when AMLO met with President Biden at the White House just last week, and we'll continue to have those conversations, and Ambassador Salazar will continue to lead our engagement with the Mexican government when it comes to those conversations. Yes?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what former Japanese Prime Minister Abe meant for U.S.-Japan relations. And while the U.S.-Japan relationship is, of course, much stronger than any one individual, how might Abe's death impact U.S.-Japan relations moving forward?
You heard from the secretary, who was honored to have both the opportunity and the invitation to visit Japan a week ago today in the tragic aftermath of the assassination of former Prime Minister Abe. The secretary attended a private convening with the Prime Minister. He presented the Prime Minister with a letter from President Biden addressed to the family of Prime Minister Abe. But Secretary Blinken also spoke on behalf not only of the American government, but on behalf of the American people when he spoke of the legacy that Prime Minister Abe leaves behind. Secretary Blinken made the point that Prime Minister Abe is one of the rare figures in history who had a vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, who advanced that idea, and someone who at the same time was able to implement that vision. Prime Minister Abe works closely with successive American administrations on that vision. I think it is only appropriate for his legacy today that we have an Indo-Pacific that together we are, with our Japanese allies and our other allies and partners around the world, are seeking to make even freer, even more open, very much as Prime Minister Abe envisioned and articulated.
Can you think of any ways in which the former Prime Minister's death might affect relationships between the United States and Japan moving forward?
I think, as Secretary Blinken said, it only redoubles our conviction that we need to continue to do everything we can to advance the vision that he put forward. We have a tremendous relationship with Prime Minister Kishida and his government, but I've already said this in a different context during this briefing. When it comes to partners, when it comes to the closest of allies like Japan, these are relationships that transcend any one prime minister, any one individual, any one leader. And the relationship between between the United States and Japan is such that it is an enduring relationship between two allies, between two countries, and a relationship that will endure for decades to come. Yes. Yeah. Yes, please. Yes.
COVID-19 ministerial meeting, which will be held tomorrow morning. What deliverables can we expect from the meeting? Secondly, the Taiwan has not received the invitation. So why will Taiwan be out of this meeting this time?
We'll have more to say on the ministerial tomorrow. This is a ministerial that we're co-hosting with our Japanese allies. Again, this speaks, I think, to the breadth of our relationship with Japan, the many shared values and the many shared interests that we have with our Japanese allies. This is an opportunity for the convening countries to discuss the urgent need to continue to address the acute phase of this pandemic and to continue to execute against the various lines of effort that are part of what we refer to as the GAP, or the Global Action Plan that we unveiled earlier this year, in February of this year, I believe. And the GAP is it's an approach that looks holistically at the challenge not only posed by COVID-19, but also the requirements of global health infrastructure that go well beyond the current pandemic to see to it that the world is better equipped to respond to the next outbreak or the next epidemic before it can become a pandemic. There are a number of countries with whom we've partnered over the course of the past 16 months in this administration on COVID-19. The ministerial tomorrow will bring together some of them, but certainly not all of them. There are other partners who have also played an important role. When it comes to Taiwan, the world, as we've said before, has a lot to learn from Taiwan when it comes to public health, when it comes to global health. We'll continue to engage Taiwanese authorities consistent with our unofficial relationship with Taiwan on public health and global health going forward. Yes, in the back.
President Biden and Secretary Blinken always affirm that they will never ever let Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon of any sort. Now, if we believe what is coming out of Iran, and not from anyone in Iran, from the Iranian Supreme Leader's advisor, who is a very credible source, that Iran is indeed a threshold state. So do you have any new assessment? Do you have any new policy towards Iran, specifically after Biden's trip to the region?
Well, we've made clear, and I think you've heard me make this point, that ever since the last administration left the JCPOA, it's no secret that Iran's fissile material and its breakout time its fissile material has increased, and its breakout time, that is to say, the amount of time it would need to acquire enough fissile material to create a nuclear weapon if it chose to weaponize. That time has decreased significantly. It has gone from about a year at its height to a matter of a few weeks or less. The reason we remain focused on determining whether we can achieve a mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA is precisely because a mutual return to compliance would put Iran's nuclear program back in a box. It would lengthen that breakout time, which is now too short for comfort, which is now dwindled well beyond where anyone would like to see it. And it would also ensure that Iran's nuclear program is once again subject to the most stringent verification and monitoring regime ever negotiated and subject to IAEA monitoring. But you said this in your question. The president has committed that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. We continue to believe that diplomacy is the most effective means by which to fulfill that pledge. We continue to believe under that framework that a mutual return to compliance with the JCPOA is the most advantageous course that remains viable, and we'll continue to pursue that as long as it's in our interest.
So you don't believe in Iranians' claims? You don't buy that? You think they are bragging?
We know that they have acquired additional fissile material. We know that their breakout time has been reduced significantly. But this president has made a commitment that Iran will not acquire a nuclear weapon. Couple final questions. Yes, Nick.
I just go back to following up on Sean's early question on President Putin's trip to Tehran tomorrow. Are there any concerns that he may use this, at least in part, to advance his country's acquisition of weapons-capable drones from Iran?
Well, we've spoken about our concerns regarding potential Russian provision, potential Iranian provision of UAV technology to Russia. We will continue to watch very closely. All of our sanctions remain in force. Any transaction of this sort would implicate a number of the sanctions that we have on the books, and presumably a number of sanctions that countries around the world have on the books. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor. Yes, Mara?
Ned, just to follow up on Sean's question also about NATO, NATO memberships of Finland and Sweden. You made some comments, but I didn't hear an answer. Just wondering, Germany ratified the agreement, and I think maybe like a dozen of them also ratified it. Obviously, Turkey has made it clear that they're going to take longer. So what is the US expectation on when this is going to be concluded? Do you guys have like a time frame that you want to get this done? It was as soon as possible. It became clear that that's not going to be the case. So like year end.
We do have a time frame, and as you just said, it's as soon as possible.
It's not realistic at this point, is it?
Well, of course, there is. We do note that the process for ratification involves legislative action or parliamentary action on the part of some 30 countries. Different countries will have to move at different speeds based upon their laws, based upon their procedures. As you've noted, several countries have already been in a position to move forward, but because this is the modification to a treaty, it is not something that can be done overnight, but we do want to see it completed just as quickly as possible. Sean?
Sure. Completely different topic, Sudan.
Yes.
There has been an uptick in violence in the Blue Nile region, and also there have been some street protests, I think, over the weekend in Khartoum. On July 4th, General Burhan made his address in which he dismissed said that he was wanted to pave the way for the civilian leadership. At the time, your reaction was fairly cautious, saying, let's wait and see what happens. Do you have any new assessment of what's happening in Sudan? Are you confident that there could be some progress in Sudan, or are you concerned with the way things are going there?
I don't have an updated assessment to offer, as you rightly noted. We did note at the time that we saw General Burhan's address to the country and his commitment to dissolve the Sovereign Council once a civilian government has formed. We encouraged at the time all sides to re-engage, to find a solution that will keep Sudan moving towards a civilian-led government, democracy, and free and fair elections. And we also urged that violence against protesters be investigated and that perpetrators be held accountable. We've continued to engage with relevant stakeholders, but I don't have an updated assessment as to the next steps. Alex.
Okay. Two questions on the South Caucasus. Can you please expand on the Secretary's Saturday tweet on about the Azerbaijan and Armenian foreign ministers meeting in Georgia, which he called positive step. I understand this also was discussed by I think the Assistant Secretary's Donfrid during her call to both Baku and Yerevan yesterday. Has the US been seeking some active role in this process? What is your role at this point?
Well, we have been taking an active role. We've consistently said that we are ready and stand ready to engage bilaterally and with like-minded partners, including through our role as an OSCE Minsk Group co-chair to help the countries find a long-term comprehensive peace. Secretary Blinken has had an opportunity in recent weeks to engage with his foreign minister counterparts, Assistant Secretary Donfrid. Others in this building have also had an opportunity to engage at high levels with their Armenian and Azerbaijani counterparts as well. We did welcome the meeting between the representatives. We continue to believe that dialogue is the best means by which to achieve a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous future for the South Caucasus region, and we'll continue to support that in any way we can.
Thank you so much. And last question on EU gas deal with Azerbaijan this morning. How reliable is it, in your opinion, given Azerbaijan's questionable relationship with Russia and also lack of human rights records?
Sorry, say that one more time. How?
Lack of human rights records and also country's questionable relationship with Russia. They had, partnership ally agreement just days before Russia invaded Ukraine.
If we have anything on that, we'll let you know. We are obviously working very closely with our EU allies as well as with other partners in the region, including Azerbaijan, on the issue of energy security. We want to see a stable global supply of energy during this time. It is something that our US-EU task force is working very closely on. It's something that we're working very closely on bilaterally with a number of countries around the world, including Azerbaijan. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.